In downtown Noumea, I've come to meet Betty Levonquer, a cafe owner and real estate agent.
Bonjour.
Hi, Silly.
Amid the French territory's problems, she says there's only one reason her cafe hasn't gone under.
We had received money from the French government, obviously. Otherwise, we would have been all dead already. You have less people, and you can tell. But we are still running, so that's good. We are not dead yet.
Since the riots last May, which caused more than €2 billion worth of damage, New Caledonia's already fragile economy has only weakened further. According to the Chamber of Commerce, an estimated 10,000 people left the territory last year, mostly French nationals.
You have still people leaving, and you can tell because we have much more apartments or houses for rent. I'm a real estate agent, right? So since May 2024, all my contracts, they failed. 5 of them failed. Between May and August, they failed. And we didn't sell anything since then because you have those people who are afraid of the future, and so they sell it for a lot less than the real value.
Experts say the exodus is creating skill shortages, especially among professionals like doctors and nurses. Still, Betty says some who left for France have ended up returning.
The main reason is that they have understood that life in France is not like they thought, that grass could be greener in France. Actually, no, not really, unless you have a lot of money.
The unrest has shaken every corner of New Caledonia's politics. Many factions now have new leaders. And for everyone, a key question is how to bankroll the recovery, with the territory's first ever pro-independence Kanak president Louis Mapu ousted when part of his coalition balked at a plan to help fund the rebuild with a loan from France rather than a grant.
C'est un sale coup politique qui est porté à notre pays.
Among the many things that shocked people, there was this, the fact that it's a debt for a future generation, whereas the state should have paid, you know. This is really not the best way to help us. This is the best way to make us more dependent on France.
In the fallout, the territory's Congress appointed a new president, Alcide Ponga, from the pro-French party Le Rassemblement.
Ce qu'attendent les Calédoniens aujourd'hui, c'est que l'on puisse travailler ensemble et donner un signal d'espoir.
Many see New Caledonia's economic woes as tied to the question of independence. Last year's unrest was driven by disputes over the territory's political future, but also by entrenched inequality. Young Kanaks are 3 times more likely to be unemployed than their fellow citizens, and many of them led the revolt in May 2024. As Noumea burned, France responded with the deployment of thousands of state forces, sweeping curfews, arrests, and a ban on demonstrations. And while many of those measures have been wound back as the violence has eased,
Bonjour.
Oh, my friend.
André Croiset at Kanak pro-independence radio station Radio Jido says the issues that prompted the youth to take to the streets are unresolved.
Le vrai problème, c'est au niveau du partage des richesses. Jusqu'à maintenant, beaucoup en ont gagné, puis ils en ont bien rempli les poches, et puis il y a beaucoup qui n'en ont pas eu beaucoup, quoi. Donc c'est ce travail de rééquilibrage et puis de partage des ressources qui est au cœur des discussions actuellement, quoi.
He says the current power-sharing arrangement with France hasn't eased the cost of living.
Beaucoup de difficultés au niveau des transports, beaucoup de difficultés au niveau des logements et beaucoup de difficultés aussi du chômage puisque beaucoup ont perdu leur travail. Au niveau de la radio, c'est beaucoup de témoignages des populations qui viennent ici, surtout par rapport au transport. C'est le plus difficile, donc pour que les gens ils viennent au travail, ils sont obligés de marcher à pied.
His colleague Nina Sanso agrees and says things must change fundamentally or there'll be more of the same.
If we don't change, every several years
there will be like that some movement, and it will become more and more aggressive. There will be more and more people who will die. So we have to say, okay, just sit. We have to sit around the table and we have to speak together and we have to find a way.
The good news is there's been some progress on breaking the deadlock. Since the riots, a new French Overseas Minister, Manuel Valls, has been appointed. And on a visit last month, he managed to get pro-French loyalist and pro-independence leaders in the same room to talk for the first time in years.
Manuel Valls, at least, is perceived as being more sensitive to the Melanesian way. He was involved in talks that led to previous peace deals with New Caledonia, but is still walking on a very tight rope. He has to try and reconcile two very different views, those who want New Caledonia to remain part of France and those who want full sovereignty.
Calling the talks discussions rather than negotiations, the slowly approach produced a synthesis paper which listed the desires of all parties on a range of contentious issues.
And it puts a finger on very sensitive issues like who will and who will not qualify as a New Caledonian future citizen. And very important as well, how will New Caledonia be described in future and what status it will have vis-à-vis France, like several options, free association, shared sovereignty, no change, or short-term independence. It's anyone's guess.
Seul le dialogue permettra de reconstruire un projet commun et partagé et d'imposer la paix. C'est ça le grand enjeu. Il nous appartient de construire une Nouvelle-Calédonie qui doit rester unie et indivisible et d'imaginer une souveraineté avec la France qui protège chacun, tout en poursuivant et achevant le processus de décolonisation et en garantissant le droit constitutionnel à l'autodétermination.
To discuss these issues and what he has planned for the territory, I'm headed to speak to its new president Alcide Ponga as he prepares to host the French delegation for another round of negotiations this weekend. Bonjour, Mr. President. Thank you, or merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for joining us on the Pacific.
Bonjour et merci de l'invitation.
To begin with, when you took up the presidency, you said more than anything else you felt the weight of responsibility. What do you mean by that?
Donc c'est une grosse responsabilité.
It's a big responsibility that is getting heavier because of the situation in New Caledonia, the political situation, but also economic and financial situation. So all this together, I must admit, it puts a big burden of responsibility on the office of president. The events of 2024, triggered by the plan to change who's eligible to vote in elections, were a means of expression, which has exploded in our face a little and which has brought our societal divisions to light. I think, in my opinion, that New Caledonia is capable of overcoming these divisions. There were the events in 1984 when we were on the verge of civil war in New Caledonia. The elders were able to get over that, create agreements, sign them and work together for 30 to 40 years. That's the challenge we have today. It's the responsibility of all New Caledonians, politicians, businesses, citizens, mayors, traditional people, the sports community, associations and so on. Everyone must work in this direction to rediscover what is deepest inside us, the desire to live together.
What's your plan to improve the economic situation in New Caledonia?
Le 18e gouvernement.
There are two sides. The first is that of the state that helps us, through public finances, subsidies, aid, loans to feed our respective budgets. But there is a second part, which is that of our own economic activity. And I'm thinking in particular of nickel, where we are working to ensure that mining activity resumes in New Caledonia. I'm convinced that with the resumption of mining activity, the economy of New Caledonia will start over, and the engine will start again and prevent all our structures from collapsing.
The Chamber of Commerce says as many as 10,000 people have left New Caledonia. Is that consistent with government figures, and what's your plan to encourage people to stay?
Je pense déjà que c'est un peu moins.
I already think it's a bit fewer, around 5,000 or so. And we need to be specific because I think in that 10,000 number, there were students who left too. And I have said this to some of my pro-independence colleagues in political discussions. We don't build our country for pigs or the deers or dogs. We build it for men and women. We build it for our children and grandchildren. And so this question of negative or positive migratory flows is an important issue. And a country is something that lives. We have a real problem with getting medical professionals to stay in New Caledonia. If we were to be independent tomorrow and we didn't have doctors, we didn't have nurses, and then people are sick, then we're all going to die here. It's complicated. We're trying to find mechanisms to bring in and attract medical staff, and I don't know if we'll succeed. But I always come back to my first point. If we stabilise a political agreement that doesn't talk about independence, but talks about continuing to build our society, that will stabilise things and facilitate the return of workers and care professionals. Today in the North Province and the Island Province, it's a medical desert. It's really unfortunate that we've gone back 40 or 50 years. But I repeat, the economic, financial, social difficulties mean there are people in Greater Noumea that can no longer buy food at the end of the month. It's very, very difficult for many families. And so we need to sign a political agreement to stabilise things.
Is it hard for you at the moment, with the current situation that New Caledonia is in, to imagine an outcome for the independence discussions that would most benefit New Caledonia? And what would that be if you could imagine that outcome?
Well, already the discussions would be in agreement. It's not about independence, because today, if we were independent, we would completely be unable to support anything at all. And it would be a social misery. It would be civil war. It would be people who steal from each other everywhere. It would be complicated in New Caledonia to talk about independence. In fact, I even think that some of my pro-independence colleagues are aware of this. Many families today who are supposedly pro-independence, they're in enormous social misery. And people, I think, know that today. I try to defend and carry the voice of an agreement that advocates for solutions to everyday problems. How do we solve social inequality? How can we manage our education? How can we manage our transport problems? But that's what the basis of the agreement has to be on today. Because if we're talking about we want to be independent and so on, for me, it's in the realm of dreams. But everyday life, it isn't dreams. When you have a dad or a mum, they have to put food on the table. And that's reality. That's what the agreement must carry. What do we put in this agreement to respond to the problems of New Caledonians? I think if we were really independent, I think that many people would regret it, because they know that it's complicated, that it will be complicated to manage a country ourselves if we were independent tomorrow.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.